The coffee shop smelled like cinnamon and fresh rain, the kind of combination that made Sarah Bennett feel like autumn had finally arrived in Seattle. She pushed through the door, shaking droplets from her blonde hair, and nearly collided with a little girl clutching a stuffed elephant. "Whoa, careful there," Sarah said, steadying herself. The girl looked up with enormous brown eyes. "Sorry, miss. Daddy says I need to watch where I'm going." "Emma, I told you to stay close." A man's voice, warm but edged with exhaustion, came from behind. Sarah looked up and found herself staring at possibly the most disheveled yet attractive man she'd ever seen. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the ends, and his worn jeans had a paint stain on one knee. But his eyes, steel gray and intelligent, caught her completely off guard. "Sorry about that," he said, placing a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "She gets excited about hot chocolate." "No harm done," Sarah said, smiling at the little girl. "I'm pretty excited about coffee myself." Emma giggled, and Sarah felt something warm settle in her chest. She'd always had a soft spot for kids, even though her career as a third-grade teacher meant she was surrounded by them all day. There was something different about seeing a parent and child together, something that always tugged at her heart. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get our order," the man said, and they moved toward the counter. Sarah found herself behind them in line, trying not to eavesdrop but unable to help overhearing when Emma asked if she could have whipped cream on her hot chocolate. "Budget's tight this week," the man said quietly. "How about we stick with regular milk, and I'll make you special pancakes tomorrow morning." "With chocolate chips?" Emma's voice was hopeful. "With chocolate chips," he confirmed, ruffling her hair. Something about the exchange touched Sarah. She'd grown up without much money herself, raised by a single mother who'd worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. She recognized the gentle way he navigated his daughter's desires while managing their finances. When they moved to wait for their drinks, Sarah stepped up to order. On impulse, she added quietly to the barista, "And can you put whipped cream on that little girl's hot chocolate? I'll pay for it." The barista smiled knowingly and nodded. Sarah collected her latte and was heading toward a table when she heard Emma's delighted squeal. "Daddy, look, they put whipped cream on it. Did you change your mind?" The man looked confused. Then his eyes swept the coffee shop until they landed on Sarah. She felt her cheeks warm as he mouthed, "Thank you." She nodded and settled at her table, pulling out the stack of essays she needed to grade. But she found herself glancing over at the father and daughter, watching as they played a game with sugar packets and laughed together. 20 minutes later, the man appeared at her table. Up close, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes and the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "I'm Jake," he said. "Jake Morrison. And that was really kind of you, what you did for Emma." "Sarah Bennett," she replied. "And it was nothing, really. Everyone deserves whipped cream on their hot chocolate." "Still, you didn't have to," he hesitated, then gestured to the empty chair. "Mind if I sit for a minute? Emma's discovered the coloring books they keep here." "Please," Sarah said, moving her papers aside. Jake sat down and she noticed his hands, strong, with calluses that suggested manual labor. "So what brings you to a coffee shop on a Saturday morning besides caffeine?" "Grading papers," Sarah said, tapping her red pen against the table. "Third-grade essays on what they did during summer vacation. You'd be amazed how many kids went to Disney World." "Teacher," Jake said, nodding appreciatively. "That's a tough job." "Says the single dad," Sarah countered with a smile. "Fair point," he grinned, and it transformed his face from merely attractive to devastating. "Though I'd argue 8-year-olds are easier one-on-one than in a classroom of 25. They fell into easy conversation. Sarah learned that Jake worked in construction, taking whatever jobs he could find, and that he'd been raising Emma alone since his wife died 3 years ago. He asked about her teaching, and she found herself telling him stories that made him laugh. Really laugh, the kind that came from his chest. "Daddy, can we go to the park?" Emma appeared at his elbow, her face sticky with chocolate. Jake glanced at his watch. "We should probably head home, sweetheart. I've got to prep for Monday's job. Emma's face fell, and Sarah felt herself speaking before she could think better of it. I was actually planning to take a walk through Volunteer Park. If you wanted company? Jake's eyes met hers, surprised and pleased. We wouldn't want to intrude on your Saturday. You wouldn't be, Sarah said honestly. These essays will still be here later. That was how their friendship began. If you could call it a friendship, when Sarah's heart did a little flip every time Jake smiled at her. Over the following weeks, their chance encounter became regular Saturday morning meetings at the coffee shop, followed by visits to the park or the library or the small aquarium Emma loved. Sarah learned that Jake lived in a modest apartment in the university district, that he drove a truck that was older than his daughter, and that he worried constantly about giving Emma everything she deserved. She learned that he read philosophy books from the library and could quote poetry, which seemed at odds with his construction worker persona but somehow made perfect sense. My dad was a literature professor, Jake explained one day as they watched Emma feed ducks at Green Lake. Before he died, he made sure I understood that working with your hands doesn't mean you can't feed your mind. Sounds like he was a wise man, Sarah said. He was. Jake's voice went soft. He would have loved Emma. And I think he would have liked you too. The comment made Sarah's pulse quicken, but she tried to play it cool. Because I'm a teacher. Because you're kind, Jake said simply. And real. You don't put on airs. If only he knew, Sarah thought. If only he knew that she'd turned down a job at a prestigious private school because she wanted to work in a public school where kids needed teachers who understood them. If only he knew that her mother's small life insurance policy had left Sarah with a nest egg she carefully guarded, never wanting to seem like she was better than anyone else. But those secrets seemed small compared to the growing feelings she had for Jake. She found herself thinking about him during her lunch breaks, wondering what he and Emma were doing. She started buying children's books at garage sales to give to Emma, always casual about it, always saying she'd found them cheap. You don't have to do this, Jake said one day when she showed up with a backpack full of books. I'm a teacher, Sarah said. It's practically required that I hoard children's books. He laughed but looked uncomfortable. I feel like I can't give you anything in return. Your friendship is enough, Sarah said, meaning it. Then, more quietly, both of your friendships. Something shifted in Jake's expression. They were alone. Emma had run ahead to the swings and he stepped closer. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Her heart hammered. Okay. I like you. A lot. More than I probably should, given that we've only known each other for 2 months. He ran a hand through his hair, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen him. But I don't have much to offer. I'm barely keeping my head above water most days, and Emma has to come first, and I can't afford to take you anywhere nice or buy you things. Jake, Sarah interrupted, placing her hand on his arm. I don't care about any of that. You say that now, he said, his eyes searching hers. But I've seen how this goes. Eventually, being with someone who's struggling financially gets old. The canceled plans because I can't afford a babysitter. The dinners at home instead of restaurants. I love dinners at home, Sarah said. And I happen to think watching Emma while you do whatever you need to do sounds perfect. Jake, I'm not with you or wanting to be with you because of what you can give me materially. I'm here because you make me laugh, because you're an amazing father, because you see me. He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly smiled. I see you, he repeated.
Yeah, I do.
He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Sarah felt like her entire world had shifted on its axis. Dating Jake was different from anything Sarah had experienced. There were no fancy restaurants or expensive gifts. Instead, there were homemade dinners in his small apartment while Emma did her homework at the kitchen table. There were movie nights with popcorn they made on the stove because his microwave was broken. There were walks along the waterfront and picnics in the park with sandwiches wrapped in aluminum foil. And Sarah had never been happier. She fell in love with Jake's daughter almost as quickly as she fell in love with Jake himself. Emma was bright and funny, with her father's quick wit and a resilience that broke Sarah's heart. The little girl had lost her mother so young, and yet she approached life with such optimism. Miss Sarah, do you think you'll marry my daddy? Emma asked one day, completely out of the blue. They were at Sarah's apartment, a modest one-bedroom in Ballard that she'd decorated with thrift store finds and DIY projects. Jake had needed to work late, and Sarah had offered to pick Emma up from the after-school program and give her dinner. "Emma," Sarah said, feeling her face heat, "that's not really something kids should worry about." "But do you love him?" Emma pressed, looking at her with those solemn brown eyes. Sarah couldn't lie to her. "Yeah, sweetheart."
I do.
Emma grinned. "Good, because he loves you too. I heard him tell Uncle Mike on the phone." Sarah's heart soared, even as she tried to stay composed. "Did he?" "Aha. He said you were the best thing that happened to him since me." Emma said it so matter-of-factly, as if she were reporting the weather. "And Uncle Mike said that Jake should probably tell you himself instead of being a scared chicken." Sarah laughed. "Your Uncle Mike sounds smart." "He's okay," Emma said with a shrug. "He's rich though, so Daddy says we can't ask him for money even though Uncle Mike always wants to help." That caught Sarah's attention. "Your dad has a rich brother." "Uncle Mike isn't his real brother," Emma explained, dipping a carrot stick in hummus. "They've been friends since they were little kids. Uncle Mike lives in a really big house and has a fancy car, but Daddy says we don't need that stuff to be happy." "Your dad's right," Sarah said, filing away this information about Jake's wealthy friend. She wondered why Jake had never mentioned this Mike. But then again, Jake didn't talk much about his past. He stayed focused on the present, on building a life for Emma. When Jake picked up his daughter later that night, Emma was asleep on Sarah's couch, covered with a blanket. "You didn't have to let her stay so late," Jake said quietly, but he was smiling. "I didn't mind," Sarah said. "We made dinner together. Well, she helped me make pasta, which mostly meant she ate shredded cheese while I cooked." Jake laughed softly. "That sounds about right." He looked at her, and something in his expression made Sarah's breath catch. "Come here." She went to him, and he pulled her close, kissing her deeply. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he said. "I know it's fast, and I know I probably shouldn't say it when I can't offer you the world, but I love you, Sarah Bennett." "I love you too," she whispered. "And for the record, you are my world. You and Emma both." The months that followed were a blur of happiness. Sarah found herself spending more time at Jake's apartment than her own. She helped Emma with homework and played endless games of Go Fish. She learned that Jake could make the best scrambled eggs she'd ever tasted and that he sang off-key in the shower. She discovered that Emma was terrified of thunderstorms and that holding her until she fell asleep was one of life's greatest privileges. She also learned that Jake was proud to a fault. When her car broke down and she offered to let him look at it, he spent hours in the parking lot of her apartment building, getting it running rather than let her take it to a mechanic. When she wanted to buy Emma a winter coat because the girl had clearly outgrown her old one, Jake insisted on paying her back in installments. "You don't have to do that," Sarah said gently. "Yes, I do," Jake replied, his jaw set. "I won't be a charity case, Sarah. Not even for you." "It's not charity. It's love." "Then let me have my pride," he said quietly. "It's all I've got sometimes." She backed off, understanding that his pride was tied up in being able to provide for his daughter, in being the kind of man who didn't need handouts. But it hurt sometimes, watching him struggle when she could so easily help. The revelation came on a Tuesday evening in March. Sarah had been at Jake's apartment, helping Emma build a volcano for a science project, when Jake's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this," he said, stepping into his bedroom. Emma continued chattering about her project, but Sarah found herself listening. Not intentionally, but the apartment walls were thin. "Mike, I told you I don't want to talk about it. No, I'm not coming back. Because I'm happy here, that's why. It doesn't matter how much money the company is making." "Mike, stop. I'm not living a lie. I'm living the life I want to live." "Fine. Yes, fine. I'll meet you for coffee, but I'm not changing my mind." He hung up, and Sarah quickly focused back on the papier-mâché volcano, her mind racing. What company? What was Mike talking about? Jake came back looking stressed. Sorry about that. Everything okay? Yeah, he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Just my friend Mike being pushy about something. Sarah wanted to ask more, but Emma chose that moment to accidentally spill a cup of water all over the kitchen table, and the crisis was averted. But the conversation nagged at her. That night, after Emma was in bed, Sarah couldn't help herself. Jake, can I ask you something? They were on his worn couch, her feet in his lap, his hands absently massaging them. Anything. What does your friend Mike do? Emma mentioned he's wealthy. Jake's hands stilled. He's in tech. Made it big with a startup about 10 years ago. And he wants you to, what? Work for him. Something like that. Jake's voice was guarded. Would that be so bad? If it paid better, you could. Sarah, I don't want to talk about this, he said it gently but firmly. My friendship with Mike is complicated, and I'm happy with my life the way it is. She nodded, letting it drop, but something felt off. Over the next few days, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was hiding something. Not something bad necessarily, but something significant. Her answer came accidentally, the way these things often do. She was at the school library, helping a student research a project on successful Seattle entrepreneurs, when she came across an article about Morrison Technologies. The founder, Michael Chun, was described as a brilliant innovator who'd built a billion-dollar company from scratch. But it was the photo of Chun and his co-founder that made Sarah's blood run cold. The co-founder was Jake. Or rather, a younger, more polished version of Jake, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. The caption identified him as tech genius Jacob Morrison, who stepped down from the company 3 years ago following a personal tragedy. Sarah stared at the screen, her mind reeling. Jake wasn't poor. He wasn't struggling. He was, what? Pretending? Playing some kind of game. She felt sick. All those times he'd talked about tight budgets, all those times he'd let her pay for things because he supposedly couldn't afford them, had it all been an act? She printed the article with shaking hands and left school early, telling the principal she felt ill. It wasn't a lie. At home, she did what she'd never done before. She Googled Jake Morrison. The results were overwhelming. Articles about Morrison Technologies, about the revolutionary software they developed, about Jake's sudden departure from the company after his wife's death, estimates of his net worth that made Sarah dizzy, photos of him at charity galas, at tech conferences, always looking uncomfortable in his expensive suits. And then more recent articles, speculation about where he'd gone, what he was doing. One blog post from a tech journalist theorized that Morrison had become a recluse, living off his fortune somewhere remote. They had no idea he was in Seattle, living in a modest apartment and working construction jobs he didn't need. Sarah felt betrayed, angry, confused. She'd fallen in love with a man who she thought understood her, who she thought shared her values. But he'd been lying to her this entire time. No, not lying exactly. He'd never claimed to be poor. He'd just allowed her to believe it, let her think they were in the same boat, struggling to make ends meet. She thought about all the times she'd worried about him, all the times she'd wanted to help but held back because she knew how proud he was, all the times she'd felt guilty for having her small savings when he seemed to have so little. He'd made her feel sorry for him, and it had all been an act. When Jake texted her that evening, asking if she wanted to come over for dinner, she replied that she needed to talk to him. Alone. Mike agreed to watch Emma, and Jake met Sarah at a park bench near the waterfront. He looked concerned the moment he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. "Why didn't you tell me you were rich?" The color drained from his face. "What?" "Morrison Technologies," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "You're not a struggling single dad working construction jobs to make ends meet. You're a tech billionaire playing dress-up in the working class." Jake closed his eyes. "Sarah, do you know how stupid I feel?" She couldn't stop the words from pouring out. "I've been worried about you, about Emma. I've been trying to help in whatever small ways I could without hurting your precious pride. And the whole time, You could probably buy this entire park without making a dent in your bank account. It's not like that, Jake said, his voice low. Then what is it like? Explain it to me. Because right now, I feel like everything between us has been a lie. I never lied to you. You let me believe you were something you're not. No, Jake said fiercely, finally meeting her eyes. I let you see who I actually am. Sarah, that life, the money, the company, the tech world, that wasn't me. That was never me. You're a billionaire, Jake. That's not something you can just opt out of. Isn't it? He stood up, pacing. After Catherine died, I looked at my life and realized I hated almost everything about it. The 60-hour work weeks, the constant pressure, the people who only cared about what I could do for them or how I could make them money. I had all this wealth and I couldn't save my wife. I couldn't bring her back. The money didn't matter. Sarah felt tears prickling her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. So you just decided to play poor? I decided to live simply, Jake corrected. Mike kept begging me to come back to the company, and I kept saying no. Finally, about 1.5 years ago, I told him I needed a break. A real break. I wanted to see if I could be happy without all the trappings of wealth. I wanted Emma to grow up understanding the value of things, not taking everything for granted. And the construction work is real, Jake said. I work because I want to, not because I have to. I like working with my hands. I like building things I can see and touch. It's honest work, and it makes me feel human in a way sitting in board meetings never did. But you let me think you were struggling financially, Sarah said, her voice breaking. You let me worry about you. I never meant to hurt you, Jake's voice was anguished. At first, when we met, I didn't tell you because I was enjoying being just Jake. Not Jake Morrison, tech mogul. Not Jake Morrison, the guy who used to be in Forbes. Just Jake, a single dad trying to raise his daughter and maybe flirting with a beautiful teacher in a coffee shop. And later, when we fell in love, when I told you I loved you, you couldn't have mentioned it then. I was scared, he admitted. Sarah, every relationship I've had since Catherine died, every woman who showed interest in me, they all changed when they found out about the money. Either they started treating me differently, seeing dollar signs instead of a person, or they couldn't handle it, couldn't understand why I choose to live the way I do. So you thought I'd be the same? No. I hoped that you'd understand. But I was terrified of losing you. Terrified that you'd look at me differently once you knew. And I was right, wasn't I? Because that's exactly what's happening right now. Sarah stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. The Seattle wind off the water was cold, and she suddenly felt exhausted. I need time to think. Sarah, please. I'm not saying it's over, she said, even though part of her wondered if it was. But I need to process this. You lied to me, Jake. Maybe not with words, but with omission. And I don't know if I can trust you anymore. She walked away, leaving him standing alone on the bench, and she didn't look back. The next week was agony. Emma texted her constantly, worried messages asking why Sarah hadn't come over, if she was mad at them, if she was okay. Sarah responded with gentle reassurances, but she couldn't bring herself to see Jake. She was angry, hurt, confused. But underneath all that, she was forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about herself. Would she have treated Jake differently if she'd known he was wealthy? She wanted to say no, but she couldn't be certain. Would she have been less comfortable around him, more self-conscious about her own modest means? Would she have questioned his interest in her, wondering if he was slumming it, playing at being normal? And was it fair to be angry at him for keeping a secret when she kept secrets too? She'd never told him about her own small savings, always letting him think she was living paycheck to paycheck like most teachers. She'd had her own reasons for hiding her financial situation, wanting to be loved for who she was rather than what she had. Maybe they weren't so different after all. On Friday evening, Sarah's doorbell rang. She opened it to find Emma standing there, alone, looking determined. Emma, where's your dad? He's in the car, Emma said, pointing to where Jake's truck was parked on the street. But I wanted to talk to you by myself. Sweetheart, you shouldn't be. Please, Emma interrupted. Can I come in? Sarah couldn't refuse those pleading eyes. She let Emma in and went to the window, giving Jake a wave to let him know Emma was safe. He nodded, staying in the truck. What's going on, Emma? Sarah asked, sitting down beside the little girl on her couch. Daddy's been really sad, Emma said, her lower lip trembling. He tries to hide it, but I can tell. And I know you've been sad too because you haven't come over, and Daddy says it's complicated adult stuff, but I think you should know something. What's that? When Mommy died, everything changed, Emma said, her voice small. Daddy used to go to work all the time and we lived in a big house and had a lot of stuff. But Daddy was sad a lot. Really, really sad. And then one day he told me we were going to try something different. We moved to the small apartment and he started working different jobs. And you know what? What? Sarah asked gently. He got happy again, Emma said. Not all the way happy. I think he still misses Mommy a lot, but more happy. And then he met you and he got even more happy. He smiles all the time now, Miss Sarah. You make him smile. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. Emma, I don't care if we have a big house or a small apartment, Emma continued. I just want Daddy to be happy. And I want you to be happy. And I think you're both happy together. So maybe the other stuff doesn't matter. Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. This 8-year-old had more wisdom than Sarah had given her credit for. You're right, Sarah said, wiping her eyes. You're absolutely right. Emma grinned. So you'll talk to Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart. I'll talk to Daddy. Emma hugged her tight, and Sarah held on, realizing how much she'd missed this little girl, how much she'd missed both of them. When Emma went back to the truck, Sarah took a deep breath and followed her out. Jake got out of the driver's seat, looking exhausted and hopeful and terrified all at once. Can we talk? Sarah asked. Yes, please. Emma tactfully announced she'd wait in the truck and play games on Jake's phone, giving them privacy. They walked down the street together, not touching but close enough that Sarah could feel the warmth of him beside her. I'm sorry, Jake said first. You were right. I should have told you. I was a coward. You weren't a coward, Sarah said slowly. You were protecting yourself. And protecting Emma. I understand that. But Jake, relationships are built on trust. And I can't be with you if I'm always wondering what else you're hiding. There's nothing else, he said quickly. I swear. Just the money. And I know that's a big thing to hide. But Sarah, it's the only part of my old life I've kept secret. Everything else. The person I am with you. The father I am to Emma. The way I feel about you. That's all real. I know, Sarah said. That's what's made this so hard. Because the man I fell in love with is the man you really are. The money doesn't change that. Then can you forgive me? Jake asked, stopping and turning to face her. Can we start over or start fresh? Or whatever we need to do. Because this week without you has been hell, Sarah. I've missed you so much. I've missed you too, she admitted. And yes, I forgive you. But we need to be honest with each other from now on. Complete honesty. Deal, Jake said immediately. What do you want to know? Everything, Sarah said. Tell me everything. So he did. They walked through her neighborhood for hours, Jake telling her about his life, about growing up middle class in Tacoma, becoming best friends with Mike Chun in college, starting a company on a shoestring budget that unexpectedly took off, about meeting Catherine at a tech conference, falling in love, getting married too young and too fast but not regretting a moment of it, about Emma's birth, the joy and the terror of becoming a father, about Catherine's unexpected diagnosis, the cancer that took her within 6 months, about inheriting money from her family that he donated to cancer research because he couldn't bear to touch it, about making Emma his priority, his entire world, and realizing that the corporate life was suffocating him. I gave Mike full control of the company, Jake explained. I'm still technically a co-founder, still on the board, but I don't participate. I let Mike buy out most of my shares, though I kept enough that Emma's future is secure. The rest, I've been slowly giving it away, to charities, to causes I care about. I don't want to be a billionaire, Sarah. I just want to be Emma's dad. And I want to be your partner, if you'll still have me. Sarah took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I'll have you, but I have a confession too. She told him about her own small inheritance, about choosing to live modestly not because she had to but because she wanted to, about understanding, perhaps better than he realized, the desire to be valued for who you are rather than what you have. We're quite a pair, Jake said, laughing softly, both of us pretending to be poorer than we are. I prefer to think of it as choosing what matters, Sarah said. And what matters is right there in that truck, playing on your phone. And here, holding my hand, Jake added, pulling her closer. He kissed her then, and it felt like coming home. Things changed after that, but not in the ways Sarah expected. Jake was still Jake. Still wore worn jeans, still worked construction jobs he didn't need, still made pancakes with chocolate chips for his daughter. But now there was no secrecy between them, no hidden parts of their lives. Sarah met Mike Chun, who turned out to be funny and warm and completely thrilled that Jake had found someone who loved him for who he was. She learned that Jake volunteered with Habitat for Humanity, using his construction skills to build homes for families in need. She discovered that the tight budget he'd mentioned was his way of teaching Emma about money management, even though Emma had a trust fund that would ensure her future. I want her to understand the value of things, Jake explained. To know that happiness doesn't come from stuff but from relationships and experiences and doing good in the world. You're a good father, Sarah told him. I'm trying to be, he said. 6 months later, Jake proposed. Not with a ridiculously expensive ring, though he could have afforded one, but with his grandmother's simple gold band set with a small diamond. It's perfect, Sarah said through happy tears. You're perfect, Jake replied. They got married in a small ceremony at the Seattle courthouse, with Emma as their flower girl and Mike as Jake's best man. Sarah's mother cried through the entire thing, and Emma declared it the best day ever. They didn't go on an extravagant honeymoon. Instead, they spent a week camping in the Olympic National Forest, just the three of them, cooking over a campfire and sleeping under the stars. It was Emma's idea, and it was perfect. Are you happy? Jake asked Sarah one night as they lay in their tent, Emma snoring softly beside them. Deliriously, Sarah whispered. Are you? More than I ever thought possible, he said. You know what the best part is? What? You fell in love with me when you thought I was just a struggling single dad. You didn't fall in love with my bank account or my company or any of the things that used to define me. You fell in love with me. Actually, Sarah said with a smile in the darkness, I fell in love with a man who is kind and funny and an incredible father. A man who makes terrible puns and sings off-key in the shower and would do anything for his daughter. The fact that he happens to have money? That's irrelevant. I love you, Sarah Morrison, Jake said. I love you too, she replied. And in that moment, lying in a tent in the middle of a forest with her new husband and stepdaughter, Sarah realized that she'd found exactly what she'd always wanted. A real love story, built on honesty and trust and the things that actually mattered. The money, as it turned out, was just a detail, a footnote in their love story. What mattered was the life they were building together. A life full of Saturday morning coffee runs, homework help, family dinners, and a love that grew stronger every day. Years later, when people asked Sarah how she and Jake met, she always told them the same story. I met him in a coffee shop. He was with his daughter, and I bought her whipped cream on her hot chocolate. Turns out he could have bought the entire coffee shop. But that's not the point of the story. What is the point? They'd ask. The point, Sarah would say, smiling at Jake across whatever room they were in, is that love isn't about money or status or what you can give someone. It's about who you are when everything else is stripped away. And Jake, without all the fancy trappings, was exactly who I needed him to be, himself. And Jake, hearing this, would always add with a grin. And she fell for me even when she thought I couldn't afford whipped cream. That's when I knew she was the 1-inch. It was a good story. More importantly, it was a true one. And they lived it, day by day, finding joy in the simple moments and building a life that money couldn't buy but love made priceless. Emma grew up knowing that her family was different, that her father had money most people didn't have. But more importantly, she grew up knowing that her family valued kindness over wealth, experiences over possessions, and people over profits. She learned that you could be rich and still shop at thrift stores, that you could afford expensive restaurants but prefer home-cooked meals, that having money meant you had a responsibility to help others. And when she went to college, a college her trust fund easily paid for, though she insisted on working part-time anyway, she told people her parents had the greatest love story she'd ever known. Dad pretended to be poor? Her roommate asked, incredulous. Dad chose to live simply, Emma corrected. There's a difference. And Mom fell in love with him anyway. That's the real story. Two people who could have had everything, who chose to focus on what actually mattered. Back in Seattle, Sarah and Jake continued building their life together. They'd eventually moved out of Jake's small apartment, but not into a mansion. Instead, they'd bought a modest house in Wallingford with a backyard big enough for Emma to play in and a garden where Sarah could grow vegetables. Jake still worked construction 3 days a week, and Sarah still taught 3rd grade. On weekends, they volunteered together at a community center, teaching kids from low-income families everything from coding to carpentry. It was Jake's idea, a way to give back, to share skills that could change lives. You know what I realized? Sarah said one Saturday evening as they cleaned up after a workshop. Emma was across the room, showing a younger girl how to hammer a nail properly. What's that? Jake asked, wiping paint off his hands. I spent so much time being angry that you'd hidden who you were, but I never thanked you for it. Jake looked confused. Thanked me for lying by omission? For giving me the chance to fall in love with you, the real you without any complications, Sarah explained. If I'd known from the start that you were Jake Morrison, tech billionaire, I would have been different around you. More guarded, maybe, or more impressed by the wrong things. But because I thought you were just Jake the construction worker, I saw who you actually are. You would have seen that anyway, Jake said softly. You see people, Sarah. It's one of the things I love most about you. Maybe, Sarah conceded. But this way, I knew for certain that I loved you for the right reasons. There was never any doubt. No doubt at all? Jake teased. Well, maybe a little doubt during that week I wasn't speaking to you, Sarah admitted with a laugh. But Emma talked me out of it. Our daughter is wise beyond her years. Our daughter, Sarah repeated, warmth flooding through her. Emma had started calling her Mom about a year after the wedding. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Sarah had cried the first time she'd heard it. That night after they'd put Emma to bed. She was 13 now, too old for bedtime stories but still young enough to want them to tuck her in. Sarah and Jake sat on their back porch, watching the stars. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked. Walking away from the company, from that life? Not for a second, Jake said without hesitation. Do you know what my biggest regret is? What? That Catherine never got to meet you, he said quietly. She would have loved you, and she would have been so grateful that Emma has you in her life. Sarah took his hand. They didn't talk about Catherine often, but when they did, it was with love and respect. Sarah had never felt threatened by Jake's late wife. How could she be jealous of a woman who'd given him Emma and taught him how to love? I wish I could have met her too, Sarah said. She raised an incredible daughter. We're raising an incredible daughter, Jake corrected. We are, Sarah agreed. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Emma graduated high school at the top of her class and chose to attend the University of Washington, wanting to stay close to home. She'd decided to major in social work, inspired by years of watching her parents volunteer in the community. I want to help people, she told them over dinner one night. Real help, not just throwing money at problems. Though Dad's money will certainly help fund some programs, she added with a grin. That's my girl, Jake said proudly. Sarah watched them, her heart full. This was what love looked like, not the fairy tale romance of movies, but the day-to-day choice to show up, to be present, to build something meaningful together. The truth about Jake's wealth had spread eventually, the way secrets always do in a city like Seattle. Some people treated him differently after they found out, viewing him with new interest or suspicion. But most of their friends, the teachers Sarah worked with, the other parents from Emma's school, the neighbors on their street, didn't care. "You're still the guy who helped me rebuild my deck," their neighbor Tom said with a shrug when he found out. "And Sarah's still the one who brings us soup when we're sick. The money's just noise." That became their philosophy. The money was just noise. It was there, a tool they could use for good, but it didn't define them. Jake continued to donate quietly to causes he believed in. Sarah started a scholarship fund for students from low-income families who wanted to become teachers. Together, they funded a reading program at Emma's old elementary school. But they never talked about it publicly. They didn't want recognition or praise. They just wanted to make a difference. "Why don't you tell people about all the good you do?" Mike asked one day. He'd become a regular fixture in their lives, a beloved uncle to Emma and a good friend to Sarah. "Because that's not why we do it," Jake said simply. "We do it because it's right, not because we want credit." Mike shook his head, smiling. "You're a better man than I am, Jake Morrison. You funded 3 schools in underserved communities last year," Jake pointed out. "You're doing just fine." It was true. Mike had been inspired by Jake's example to become more philanthropic, to use his wealth for more than just accumulating more wealth. The two friends, so different in many ways, shared the same core values. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jake surprised Sarah with a trip, not to Paris or Rome or any of the exotic destinations they could easily afford, but to the coffee shop where they'd first met. It had changed hands since then, but the new owners had kept the same cozy atmosphere. "Why here?" Sarah asked, though she was touched. "Because this is where it all started," Jake said. "This is where a beautiful blonde woman bought whipped cream for my daughter and changed my life forever." They ordered the same drinks they'd had that first day, coffee for Sarah, hot chocolate for Emma, who they'd brought along for the celebration, and tea for Jake. They sat at the same table, though Emma was too old now to be satisfied with coloring books. "You know what's weird?" Emma said, scrolling through her phone. "I've been looking through old photos, and I barely remember the big house we used to live in before Mom died. But I remember everything about the apartment where we lived when I met Sarah. That's because that's when we became a family," Jake said, reaching across the table to take Sarah's hand. "Exactly," Emma agreed. "That's when we became us." Sarah felt tears prickling her eyes, happy tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best," Emma said, grinning at both of them. Later that night, after Emma had gone to meet friends, Jake and Sarah walked along the waterfront, just like they had so many times over the years. "Happy anniversary," Jake said, pulling her close. "Happy anniversary," Sarah replied. "Thank you for the coffee shop. It was perfect." "Just like you," Jake said. "I'm not perfect," Sarah laughed. "I'm stubborn and I hold grudges and I can't cook fish without burning it." "Perfect for me, then," Jake amended. They stood there, watching the ferries cross the dark water, the lights of the city twinkling around them. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here, the chance meeting, the hidden identity, the hurt and forgiveness, the years of building a life together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd known from the start?" Sarah asked. "If you'd told me that first day who you really were?" "Sometimes," Jake admitted. "But then I remember that things happened exactly the way they were supposed to. Maybe I needed to be just Jake for a while. Maybe you needed to fall in love with me without any complications. Maybe it all worked out the way it did for a reason." "I think you're right," Sarah said, "though I still wish you'd told me sooner." "Noted," Jake said with a laugh. "Any other secrets I should confess?" "Just one," Sarah said, suddenly nervous. Jake pulled back to look at her. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," Sarah said softly. Jake's face went through a series of expressions. Shock, disbelief, then pure joy. "You're serious?" "Completely serious. 8 weeks. I found out last week, but wanted to wait until tonight to tell you." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a kid. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," Sarah confirmed. laughing with him. They called Emma immediately, putting her on speakerphone to share the news. Her shriek of excitement was so loud they had to hold the phone away from their ears. "I'm going to be a big sister," Emma yelled. "Oh my God. This is the best anniversary present ever." It was a new chapter in their story. But then again, their entire relationship had been about new chapters. About choosing to move forward, to build something beautiful out of unexpected circumstances. The baby, a boy they named Henry, after Jake's father, arrived the following spring. Emma was immediately smitten, declaring herself the best big sister in the world and proving it by getting up for midnight feedings and learning how to change diapers. "You don't have to do all this," Sarah told her, though she was grateful for the help. "I want to," Emma said, cradling Henry with practiced ease. "He's my brother. And besides, you and Dad always showed up for me. It's my turn to show up for you." Jake, watching his daughter with his son, felt his heart might burst. This was his family, this beautiful, complicated, perfect family that he'd never imagined having. Catherine would have loved this, he thought. She would have loved Sarah and been so proud of Emma and completely besotted with Henry. He'd been lucky enough to have two great loves in his life. Not everyone got that. As Henry grew, the Morrison household became even more chaotic and wonderful. Emma went off to graduate school but visited often, always eager to see her baby brother. Sarah took a year off from teaching to be home with Henry, then returned part-time, finding a good balance between her career and motherhood. Jake, at 50, finally fully stepped away from Morrison Technologies, selling his remaining shares to Mike and establishing a foundation to fund educational programs. He had enough money set aside for his family's future, and the rest could do more good in the world than sitting in a bank account. "You're really doing it," Mike said when Jake signed the papers. "Walking away completely." "I walked away years ago," Jake reminded him. "This is just making it official." "And you don't regret it?" "Not even a little." "My biggest regret," Jake said honestly, "is not doing it sooner. I spent too many years chasing success that didn't make me happy. Now I have everything I actually want." Mike smiled. "You know, I used to think you were crazy, giving up the company, living like you weren't rich, all of it. But seeing you now, seeing your family, I get it. You're the happiest person I know." "I am," Jake agreed. "I really am." That night, Sarah found Jake in Henry's room, watching their son sleep. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her head against his back. "Penny for your thoughts," she murmured. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," Jake said. "How different my life could have been if you hadn't walked into that coffee shop that day." "I think we would have found each other somehow," Sarah said. "Some things are meant to be." "You think so?" "I know so," Sarah said firmly. "Because what we have, this family, this life, it's not built on chance or luck or even money. It's built on love and trust and showing up every single day. That's not something that happens by accident." Jake turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you, Sarah Morrison. Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me. All those years ago." "I love you too," Sarah said. "And for the record, I'd fall in love with you all over again. Construction worker, billionaire, or anything in between." They kissed softly, careful not to wake Henry, then tiptoed out of the room together. In the living room, they found Emma video calling them, her face on the tablet they'd left on the coffee table. "Forgot to sign off," she said with a laugh. "But also, I just wanted to say I love you guys, and I'm really proud to be your daughter." "We're proud to be your parents," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Okay, now I'm actually signing off before this gets too sappy," Emma said, but she was smiling. "Night, Mom. Night, Dad." "Night, sweetheart," they said in unison. After Emma disconnected, Jake pulled Sarah down onto the couch beside him. "You know what I just realized?" he said. "What's that?" "We've been together for 15 years now, and I still get excited when I know I'm going to see you. Still look forward to our date nights. Still want to tell you about my day. Still think you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." "That's because you're in love," Sarah said, snuggling closer. Real love. The kind that lasts. The kind that lasts, Jake repeated. Yeah, I like that. They sat there in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about the unlikely journey that had brought them together. A chance encounter in a coffee shop. Whipped cream on hot chocolate. A secret identity. Hurt and forgiveness. Years of building a life together one day at a time. It wasn't a perfect story, no real story ever was. There had been hard times, arguments, moments of doubt. But through it all, they'd chosen each other. Again and again, they'd chosen love. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not the money in the bank or the house they lived in or any of the external markers of success. What mattered was this. Two people who loved each other. A family they'd built together. And a life full of meaning and purpose. Hey, Jake, Sarah said softly. Yeah? Thank you for being poor, she said with a smile. He laughed, understanding what she meant. Thank you for falling in love with me anyway. Always, Sarah promised. I'll always fall in love with you. And she meant it. Through all the years to come, through Henry's childhood, through Emma's wedding, through the foundation's growth, through their own aging, Sarah kept falling in love with Jake over and over again. Because that was the secret no one told you about true love. It wasn't something that happened once and stayed static. It was something you chose every single day in 1,000 small ways. And Sarah and Jake, they kept choosing each other. Every morning when Jake made coffee just the way Sarah liked it. Every evening when Sarah asked about his day and really listened to the answer. Every weekend when they volunteered together side by side. Every holiday when they gathered their family around them and gave thanks for what they had. In all these moments, they were choosing love. And that choice, that daily, hourly, constant choice, was worth more than any fortune could ever be. Years later, when Henry asked his father how he'd known Sarah was the one, Jake thought carefully before answering. I knew when she bought your sister whipped cream on her hot chocolate, he said. Not because it was a grand gesture, but because it was kind. Because she saw a little girl who wanted something and a father who was saying no, and instead of judging, she just quietly helped. That's who your mother is, someone who sees people and helps without needing credit or recognition. But lots of people are kind, Henry pointed out. He was 12 now, logical and thoughtful like his father. You're right, Jake said. But your mother saw me. Not Jake Morrison the billionaire. She didn't know about that yet. Just me. Just a tired single dad trying his best. And she loved that person. That's how I knew she was the one. Because she loved me at my most ordinary. That's pretty cool, Henry said after a moment. Yeah, Jake agreed, smiling. It really is. And so the story continued, generation after generation. A testament to the power of choosing love over fortune, authenticity over appearance, and meaning over money. The Morrison family grew and changed, but the foundation remained the same. Love built on honesty, strengthened by challenges, and renewed every single day. It was a simple story, really. A blonde woman, a single dad, a coffee shop, whipped cream on hot chocolate. And from those small, ordinary moments, an extraordinary life bloomed, proof that the best love stories aren't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings, but about showing up, being real, and choosing each other every single day. That was the story of Jake and Sarah Morrison. And it was a story worth telling.